What's poppin', everybody? Episode 24 of the Slip and Weave podcast. Got a big episode today. Talking Leo Santa Cruz and Gervonta Davis. I'm talking Usyk and Chisora. I'm talking a great couple of cards from this past weekend and more. So let's get right into it. Busy right now. I was going through my notes just now and I realized how many different things I want to be talking about today. It's a good time for the sport, man. There was a lot of great fights this past weekend. There's a lot of great fights coming up this weekend. So let's get right into it, man. There was a good card on DAZN that had several quality fights at 115 pounds, and the first one of note was between Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez fighting a guy named Israel Gonzalez. Choclotito, if you're not familiar, is regarded as one of the great little men of this era, if not the best. And the opponent he was taking on was a lot taller than him. He had some nice range. He was boxing on the outside, really nice early. And he maybe won the first 2 rounds, but with Choclotito, the pressure, picks up over time, and he eventually kind of starts bursting your pipes with that pressure a little bit. And, he starts hitting you in the body every time you're on the ropes. The combinations get longer and more creative and more unpredictable. And it's sort of like an avalanche over time. And you could see that Israel Gonzalez was having a hard time with it. It's a lot to handle. And Chocolatito, by the last 5-6 rounds, maybe 4 rounds, was really putting it on this guy. I mean, he was just wailing on him. And the fact that the kid finished the fight, I thought was really impressive. There was a handful of times where I was like, they might want to think about wrapping this thing up, because Israel is a good young fighter, and Chocolatito was just on him, man. He was just on him the whole time. And, I've talked about this before with him, but he has a great little move on the inside where he uses that backhand as a shield, and he'll shift his feet. So he'll shift over this way, block here, throw a combo. He'll shift back this way, throw a combo here. So he punches, and he always keeps his feet moving, and he always keeps fucking mic stand. And he always keeps his positioning, ready to punch and on balance, a lot like Golovkin. That's why they used to put him on the same cards as Golovkin. It's very similar. But it's just a simple little shuffle, front foot, back foot here, punch. Back foot, front foot here, punch. So he's constantly moving side to side, changing, where he is after he punches. And so, I mean, he's very aggressive, so of course he gets hit. But for the most part, he's very difficult to deal with on the inside, because you are going to spend a lot of time missing and hitting the gloves. He does move his head. He's not giving you gimme shots. You are going to hit him because he's so aggressive, but he's not giving you a whole lot of gimmies. And ultimately, this was a class over time, and Chocolatito's class showed over time. The main event on this card was 2 guys that Chocolatito has some experience with. It was a rematch between Juan Fransisco Estrada and Estrada-Cuadras, both, top-notch guys at 115 pounds, junior bantamweights. And, this is a rematch of a fight that was a 1-point victory across the board, right? I looked this up, and I remember watching their first fight. Estrada put Cuadras down, I believe, in round 10, and that was the difference. All of the cards were 114 to 113. So this rematch absolutely made sense. It was a good, top-level opponent for Estrada, and I think a good way of gauging whether or not a rematch between him and Chocolatito makes sense is warranted. This is a very, very high-level opponent. Cuadras also gave Chocolatito, in my mind, maybe the most physical fight of his career. If you go back and watch it, Cuadras' speed, and combinations in the exchanges against Chocolatito was so spot on when it was a very, very close fight. So And it had Cuadras won, I would have loved to have seen a rematch with Chocolatito and Cuadras. So this was a win-win situation. And ultimately, this was one of those classic back and forth fights, man. It had a real feel of like an Israel Gonzalez, Rafael Marquez. It was that intense. And what was cool was Cuadras early in the fight. He was boxing really well. He was putting together nice combinations. You know, he dropped Estrada in the third round, and it was kind of looking like, okay, maybe Estrada's a little caught off guard by just how much Cuadras is bringing it. And I think once he put Estrada down, I think it woke Estrada up to the level of fight that he was in. And again, a lot like Choclotito, although this fight was much more competitive, this was a slow roll. This was a slow avalanche. It was like every round Estrada did a little more and a little more and a little more. And interestingly, he's sort of the, you know, if this is Marquez Pacquiao, he's more of the Marquez, right? He's more of like a counterpuncher, back foot fighter. And this one, he had to bring it to Cuadras because Cuadras was boxing very well early in the fight. So Estrada's bringing it, and every round he's just getting a little more in, a little more in. You know, round 8, 9, sharp punching, moving his head on the inside. You could see it's all starting to get to Cuadras a little bit. And ultimately, Estrada stops Cuadras in round 11 in a fucking great fight. If these guys wanted to do it a third time, I wouldn't have a problem with that either. You know, Carlos Cuadras, anytime I see this guy, it's a good fight. You know, he brings it no matter what. He's a championship level guy. He's 39, 4-1 with 27 knockouts. This is a guy who shows up to win. And, you know, but for Estrada, I think ultimately what this means, and this is what was being talked about prior to the fight, what it means is that, you know, he and Choclotito are going to do a rematch. Choclotito beat Estrada back in 2012. And I think this rematch absolutely makes sense. They've both positioned themselves legitimately as the top two guys in the weight class again. And I hope they put this together as soon as possible. This junior bantamweight weight class between, you know, I've talked about this before, but this junior bantamweight between Chocolatito, Estrada, Cuadras, again, you got Sorong Visai that's in the mix. You have McWilliams Arroyo. You know, you got Yoka from Japan, Kazuto Yoka. It's a very interesting weight class, and they're all fighting each other. You have Cal Yafai, too, Chocolatito's most recent opponent, who's a very high-level guy. So this weight class is a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite weight classes in boxing, particularly since they're all fighting each other. There was also, and this was on Friday, by the way, last Friday. On Saturday, there was a really good card on Showtime. That I was a little, you know, I didn't think I was going to be talking about it because the fights, you know, generally I like to talk about, now that we have options and there's so many fights, I like to talk about the bigger ones. But the quality of fights on this card were so high that it was like, I gotta talk about this. This is, you know, these are incredible fights. The first one was Xavier Martinez, who's 16-0 with 11 knockouts, won a unanimous decision over Claudio Marrero. This was at junior lightweight, 130 pounds. And this is a really interesting fight, man, because Claudio Marrero is one of those, you know, crafty veterans who's been in at the highest level multiple times. You know, he's fought world-class guys. He's got multiple first-round knockouts against undefeated opponents. And Martinez... And, you know, Martinez is just kind of a young, unbeaten prospect. It's hard to know what you're getting from him, you know, but ultimately what we got was Marrero was showing Martinez a lot of different looks, be it he's going to box from the outside now. Beginning of the round comes out, boom, he jumps on him, he throws a hard combination. You know, he was trying a lot of different things, trying to see what worked, and sometimes it did work, but Martinez had a really strong jab. He was really, really strong and tough in the pocket. He has fast hands. You know, he knows how to catch and shoot and move his head on the inside. So then in round 8, Marrero drops Martinez twice. And it looks like he's going to get him out of there. You know, Martinez's feet are out. He's all over the place. Marrero is really throwing. And he doesn't get him. I don't know if he punched himself out or if he just thought, this kid's tough. He's going to stick around. But he didn't get him. And then the back end of the fight, Martinez, showed a lot of heart to pull himself together and ultimately kind of outbox Marrero and outwork him. There was times where Marrero was on the outside moving effectively, but he wasn't really landing any punches. So the last 4 rounds, Martinez really brought the fight to Marrero, gritted it out, made it work, threw body shots, threw his jab, and just made it happen against a very, very tricky, difficult opponent who's given him a lot of different looks. A lot of times to me, a fight like this is even more impressive than a blowout because we know, based on the competition that Marrero, is just under that elite level, right? He's a legitimate contender. And he gave Martinez, I think, every different look he could give him, buzzed him, had him on his ass, and I think Martinez legitimately won the fight. I don't think you could argue that Marrero took it. Particularly since Martinez won the last 4 rounds, maybe. I had it 114, 112 for Martinez, and I could even see 115, 111. And so very impressive come from behind victory. When you see that, with young guys like that, it's really impressive because it shows the kind of character they have as they step up. You know what I'm saying? How they're going to react to that kind of resistance, to somebody that, is not impressed with your record and wants it just as bad as you want it, and in fact has beaten guys at your level. So how do you make that work? And now they have you on your backside. So how do you flip the script on that? I was very impressed with the victory from Martinez. The main event on this Showtime card was a draw between Sergey Lipinets and a guy from Canada named Custio Clayton, who I had never heard of before. Undefeated. He was 18-0 at the time, still undefeated after the draw. And, I had heard that Lipinets was supposed to fight another guy. I think it was another Kazakh guy, Abdukhorov. And that fight, for whatever reason, didn't happen. I don't know exactly the backstory on that, but Clayton was brought in as sort of a late replacement. And this guy's a fucking nightmare to bring in as a late replacement. I mean, every single round of this fight was difficult to score. Every single round was close, pretty much, which is why the draw is, I think, very appropriate. Very different styles between these two guys. Clayton is a very loose outside boxer. He moves his head. He's super elusive. He'll roll his shoulder. He'll keep his hands low. He's moving his head. He's moving his feet. Lipinets is very much like gloves up high, stalking you, trying to throw body shots, trying to pin you on the ropes. And both of them did these things effectively. I thought for large stretches of the round, Clayton could kind of de-impact the round, keep Lipinets on the end of his shots. He hit hard enough to get his respect. So, there were stretches where Lipinets was sort of just caught with his hands in his pocket, trying to catch, move his head. And Lipinets has a great defense as well. He keeps his gloves high, keeps his head moving, flexes at the waist. And then when he would get his opportunities and have brief moments where he would have Clayton on the ropes, he would get 3-4 hard ones off. Hard ones. And Clayton was never really even buzzed. So this was just a really entertaining welterweight fight. I think these are two guys at that weight class. It's such a stacked weight class. But whatever the elite is, they're just under it. And they probably both deserve a shot. I would love to see them, do a rematch to maybe get some clarity on, who should get that shot first. Because low-key, I think Clayton is one of the most slept-on guys at welterweight after this fight. I don't think it was Lipinets' best performance, just with the long layoff. But this guy Clayton, with those boxing skills and that length and that power, I think he gives anybody at welterweight a hard time. Because good luck finding him. You got to have that same kind of defense and footwork that Lipinets has. So I would say look for either of these guys in a big fight or in a rematch. So then we got next weekend coming up, right? A lot going on. We got the big fight between Leo Santa Cruz and Gervonta Tank Davis. I am, like a lot of you, I'm fucking jacked up about this fight. I'll tell you what. When they signed this, I was like, whew, this is a real fucking matchup right here. This is what I'm talking about. Santa Cruz, he's 37-1-1, 19 knockouts. You know, he's got relentless pressure. He throws so many punches. He's long. He's tall. He can box if he needs to and get behind his jab. Leo's a handful, man. Leo is a handful. You know, I was looking at their resumes, and as far as fighting the absolute elite of the sport, you know, Leo's had his 2 fights with Abner Mares, 2 fights with Carl Frampton, both at featherweight. Won both fights with Mares, very close fights. Lost, split 2 fights with Frampton, lost the first one, the rematch. And, you know, aside from those guys, and those were very tough, close fights, Leo's basically blown through anybody I've ever watched. I'm talking, these opponents are the elite opponents. He's fought other guys that are terrific fighters, but anybody that's not those 2 guys, Leo just walks through them, man. His pace is too much. He throws too many punches. He's too long. He does not get hurt. His chin is like iron. And it's going to get tested in this one, for sure. There's no doubt about that. Tank, you know, Tank is 23-0, 22 knockouts. Everybody knows what Tank brings, man. Tank brings speed, power, explosiveness, you know, Golovkin-type power. It's jarring, and that's part of why he gets so many early knockouts, you know, and he's got the speed and the boxing IQ to go with it. And I think the kind of punching power he has, it's not that just he's a strong puncher. It's that special, like Kovalev, Tyson, Golovkin, that kind of power. It's really concussive, put you out with one-shot power. And he's shown it against, you know, essentially every opponent. I did the same sort of thing with him where I looked at on his resume, you know, who's a guy that's at the elite level. You know, and the 2 for me was one that I was actually at, was his fight with Jose Pedraza, who you've heard me talk about on this show, who is now a contender at 140 pounds. This fight's taking place at 130 pounds. So that win over Pedraza in 2017, to me, looks better and better every day, because Pedraza's had, you know, success at these higher weights, and has fought well against top-level guys. So to me, that's a top-level win. The other top-level win is his last fight against Yuriorkis Gamboa. You know, there were things about that fight that were really impressive. He put Gamboa on his ass 2-3 times early in the fight. Overall, dominated the fight, won all but maybe 1 or 2 rounds. You know, but to me, what was interesting was, and this was partly Gamboa, but Gamboa, even though he got dropped twice early in the fight, even though he tore his Achilles early in the fight, we found out after, down the stretch of the fight, where Tank hasn't spent a lot of time, he hasn't spent a lot of time in the back end of the fight, Gamboa started landing some punches. There was rounds where Gamboa pushed Tank back and hit him on the ropes. And Gamboa is not known as the kind of pressure volume fighter that Leo is, which I could foresee being difficult for Tank if he, you know, at some point in the middle back end of the fight starts to get a little tired. Leo's not getting tired. I can tell you Leo's not getting tired. So that was just something I noticed, was that despite, you know, really dominating him, at the end, towards the end of the fight, Gamboa was able to find success because Tank's work rate just went down so much. And you have to wonder how making the weight and all that is going to play into his stamina, how his body's feeling. But, and look, if you've been watching this channel, you know I've gotten the last couple predictions wrong, so I would take this all with a grain of salt. But the way I personally see this fight playing out is I think that early in the fight, you know, maybe not early in the fight, but the first 7 or 8 rounds, I think that overall Tank's speed and power and athleticism and foot movement is going to be a little much for Leo. And he's a lot bigger than anyone Leo's ever fought. He hits a lot harder. So I think that Leo's going to be a little smarter. and Tank may be able to clip him and hurt him, maybe even keep his hands in his pocket a little bit, and maybe stop him in that first 7 to 8 rounds. But if he does not stop Leo and he gets at all tired, I think that Leo will, the last 4 or 5 rounds, will be able to make something happen and make the fight close. So, and I think that's ultimately what will happen. I think that Leo is a special fighter as well, in a different kind of way, just in a work rate, heart kind of way, and conditioning and all of the things. You know, he's an elite level guy. So I do see Leo in the back end of the fight making something happen and really pressing Gervonta along the ropes and landing combinations, and Gervonta winning probably winning a close decision over Leo. But I think that both of their stock goes up from this fight. I think that Leo is going to be able to put himself in a position to say, look what I did against, a top pound for pound guy, be it at 126, 130, or 135, they'll both be considered two of the best in that weight neighborhood after this fight. And I think it's going to be a great fight. And, Regis Prograis on the undercard. There's a couple other good fights on the undercard, but this one's worth watching because I think that both of these guys are some of the best young fighters of their era. So definitely tune into that. Also on Saturday, there's going to be a card on DAZN. It's going to be Alexander Usyk and Derek Chisora. I love this matchup, man. I love this matchup. It kind of sucks that in the last few years, Usyk hasn't been more active. I know he's had injuries and then COVID and whatever. But, I have this guy on my top pound for pound list, and, he's fought essentially once in the last 2 years. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Usyk against a heavyweight that has been in with everybody, man. This guy's fought Tyson Fury and Dillian White, twice each. He's been in there with most of the top guys at heavyweight, and he's always proven that he brings a good fight. Every once in a while, he gets a win over one of those guys. If Usyk can beat Chisora, I think he makes the case that, I'm here. I'm one of the top guys at heavyweight. I can take your size. I can take your power. And I can throw hard enough, and I'm fast enough and smart enough that I can handle whatever you guys bring. This is a great gauge of where he's at the elite level at heavyweight. And I think that he's going to win a unanimous decision. I think he's going to box really good, and I think he's going to have to really work for it. Chisora is really going to push him, maybe like he's never been pushed before. But I do see this being a really good fight, and hopefully, on the other end of it, if we can't get, Joshua and Fury immediately, hopefully we can get Joshua and Usyk. That's a fight that I would love to see, particularly if Usyk has a good night against Chisora. So that's going to be on DAZN. Definitely check that out. There's also going to be a fight between Naoya Inoue and Jason Maloney on ESPN+. Inoue, the monster, one of the most explosive punchers in all of boxing, even though he's a bantamweight. You see this guy blowing through people. His last fight was a very, close competitive fight against the legend Nonito Donaire. I think that he'll probably stop Maloney, but I'm not really sure. I've seen Maloney, and I was impressed with him. I've talked about him on this show, the weekend he fought. But Inoue, again, one of the top pound-for-pound guys. I know some people have him in their top 5. I don't know about all that yet, but he's definitely, super exciting, super talented, explosive. This is can't miss TV. He's like the new Choclotito almost. He's like the new elite level little guy. Maybe those two can fight one day. We'll see. And the last one was on Friday. Jaime Munguia is going to be fighting Toriano Johnson. I think it's his first fight at middleweight. I'm not entirely sure. So, yeah. So that's everything for this past weekend and for next weekend. Definitely make sure. I know there's 3 different cards on next weekend, but, it's all going to be high-level shit. Oh, also, Michaela Mayer is fighting for a title against Yua Brodnik. I've never seen her, but I've seen Michaela, obviously, a bunch. Talked about her on this show as well. And, hopefully she can get her first world title. So I know that was a lot of different topics, but that's it for the Slip Movie podcast this week. And I'll be back next week to talk about all these different fights, do a review of Leo and Gervonta. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about this fight, man. I'm very excited. Let me know what you think about Tank and Leo. Let me know what you think about Usyk and Chisora and any of the fights that I talked about today. And thanks so much for listening again. This has been episode 24. I'll catch you guys next week. Peace.